Hi, Pat, this is Jennifer. I'm on the call. Sorry I couldn't get there in person today.
That's okay. We can hear you. We're good started here in just a little bit.
Okay, great, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council member. We're still gathering here, so it'll be just a couple minutes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hi, Max, it's Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer. Great to hear your voice.
Great to hear your voice too. Happy Thursday.
I know we made it.
We
Top of
made
the
it.
month. You okay? I just realized there's pictures behind me, which is not very professional, but I can't do nothing about that.
Change your background. Your virtual background.
Chair White, we have a quorum with you and Councilmember Adams and Councilmember McMahon are here in the room. I do not know the status of Council or Vice Mayor Jimmy Davis or Councilmember Laura Pastor at this moment. So if you'd like to wait a couple minutes, we can, or we can proceed.
Let's proceed. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 12:03 since we have a quorum. Pat, will you be able to call roll for us, please?
Yes. Councilmember Max White, City of Avondale.
Here.
Councilmember Peggy McMahon, Town of Fountain Hills. City of Phoenix, Councilmember Laura Pastor. City of Tempe, Councilmember Jennifer Adams.
Present.
And City of Tolleson, Vice Mayor Jimmy Davis. Chair, we can proceed. We do have a quorum of 3.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item number 1, public comment. The public will be provided with an opportunity at this time to address the committee on 9 non-agenda items and all action items. Up to 3 minutes will be provided per speaker unless the chair allows more at his or her discretion. A total of 15 minutes for all speakers will be provided. Pat, do we have any comments that were submitted prior to our meeting?
Not prior to, but Mr. Crowley is here today.
All righty, welcome, Mr. Crowley. Go ahead and start his 3 minutes once he arrives at the podium.
I'll start by saying that I was at the managers meeting yesterday, and when I looked at their plans for the future, it was, what are your plans for the future? And nothing was submitted. Being that I've got this document here that shows all the routes that were, delayed and dropped, et cetera. And I'm wondering why are the emphasis from each of your communities is to get some of the things that weren't there, as in the old plan, Wickenburg had a route. What is being done to reestablish that? It also says in the new plan that you guys are going to double the buses. Well, you only have 40% of the routes never got dealt with. And I also don't see where there is anything being done about getting buses. I also don't see anything for bus stops. Back in the plan that we put together, and Fountain Hills was my vice chair. And one of the things that it said for Fountain Hills was circulator and a connector. That's never happened. You need to ask and start beating the drum for that. All of the communities need to be doing that, but I don't see that being done. What I do see being done is over at MAG, we're making sure that we're going to be expanding all these roadways. It's on page 5 in the document that people got in the mail that has 30 different roadways that they want to align, like 60, et cetera, to decrease congestion or improving the roadways to get the people onto the freeway. Well, we know that the best way to decrease congestion is mass transit. And where is the infrastructure going to go on those roadways, and where are the buses that are going to be going on those roadways? I'd also like a bifurcation of the agencies, because well, back in the day with that $30 million contract that you guys okayed this last month, I brought it up that the little part that was the bus, there wasn't any connectivity between the bus and the rail at about 7 different routes. And Jessica says, well, we're going to be looking at that again. But since then, of course, can she show me anything that was done to go for the bus, put in some of those routes that weren't done, like yours, the Avondale route and the Litchfield route, there was no attempt at all. And we know that there was money there because the light rail kept on getting more and expanding. Just a thought, y'all. We need some advocates for the bus, and we need those two agencies bifurcated.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley, for your comments. We appreciate your input. To item number 2, Pat, this is the Chief Financial Officer's update. Mr. Ken Kessler, our Chief Financial Officer, will give us an update on some current issues. Mr. Kessler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. One item we typically update each month is the PTF revenues. However, given the timing of this meeting being so early in the month and the timing when we typically receive that information from the, we do not have the January revenues to report. Last month we reported through December, so next month we'll report the revenues through January. One thing I did want to remind folks of is the timeline of our budget process. So this is coming in, fast and furious here. We started back in the fall with some preliminary information. As we go forward here into February, we'll start with the financial working group and RTAG group in terms of providing some of the high level budget numbers that have been refined since the fall. And then as we go into March, we'll get into some of the more detailed initiatives that we'll discuss with the city staff or member staff. And then subsequent to that, we'll be following up with that detailed information to the board as well, working our way through into May for adoption of the FY26 budget. So that is all I have for my updates for this month. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kessler, committee? Again, this item was for information only. Thank you so much. We'll move to item number 3. It's our January 9th meeting minutes from our Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting. They are presented for approval. We will need to take action on this. If you haven't had a chance to review them, let's just take the next minute or so to do that.
After we're done with that, Chair, I'll move to approve. This is Jennifer.
I'll second.
Okay, we can take that motion in that second. I appreciate that. Any questions, discussions, concerns with the minutes as presented for January 9th?
No, I'll move minutes as written.
Okay. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Aye. Okay. The motion passes and we're accepting the minutes. We'll move to item number 4. And this is FY25 second quarter budget review. Mr. Tyler Olson, Budget and Operations Financial Control Manager, will provide a review of FY25 second quarter budget. We'll turn it over to Mr. Olson, and this is for information only as well.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'll quickly walk us through the second quarter of 25 budget first actuals. Our target spend would be right at 50% if we're right on track. We have noted the variances in the handouts. They're included in your packet, and we have no concerns as we're well within the board appropriation. Starting with RPTA. Total sources of funds for operating, excluding pass-throughs, we got 278 million budgeted, and 44% essentially collected thus far. Other funds, our cash investments, has continued, as you saw in Q1, outperforming based on current market trends. And RARF is received as a lump sum there, so it's 107%, slightly over plan. That's received in the first quarter for the year, so we won't see any further changes to that. Moving on to capital sources, slow activity on the capital side of things on the expenditures, and we'll see that as we move in through the presentation here. On the operating expenditure side, We're within plan as a whole, 47% spent through the second quarter here. Van pool operations tracking slightly above plan. As mentioned last quarter, it's a good story. Expenses are 100% recovered by riders and federal revenues, just have some increased usage combined with the new vehicles that are used within that contract. This is just one of the programs that will be bringing forward a increase in the mid-year budget adjustment to true those expenses up from plan, and it'll be part of Mr. Kessler's presentation next. On the capital side of things, again, very slow spend here, only 10%. And it's really based upon timing of vehicles delivered and other projects. Moving into the operating, as mentioned, the variance notes are in your handout. Just minor changes here. Fixture out, it's worth mentioning that we're actually gonna, although you see some smaller items overrunning here, we actually do have some savings that we're planning on bringing. So we're gonna reduce that number for mid-year based upon fuel. Our fuel is a little bit aggressive, so we're gonna pull that back. And then demand services, we have some increases there, really around service and rate changes and van pool, as I previously mentioned. And just some minor variances here on the total operating budget is within the plan. On the capital side of things, again, very minor changes here. It's really tied to the timing of when expenses hit, and don't expect any exceeding a plan even through the end of the year there. So I'd be happy to address any questions on the RPTA side before I move into the VMR.
Please proceed. Thank you.
All right, VMR, same view. Sources of funds, about 55%, slightly ahead on member city contributions. That's really related to the City of Phoenix IGA for South Central. We know that's coming on board, so starting to collect that money. And the capital side of things at 40% collected. Still waiting on some federal grants to be released. Using some of the local funding in place of that at this point, but we do expect that to catch up as we move through the year. And we do have a very dynamic capital plan that be a part of a mid-year adjustment as well. On the operating side of things, you can see that security on light rail is slightly above plan. That's really due to the board approving increased wage rates after the budget was adopted last fiscal year. We're developing it. So we're really just truing up the board's direction with the budget and Mr. Kessler's presentation coming up. And then on the capital side of things, you know, they could vary greatly from plan for the year, but all the capital extension budgets are within the multi-year FTA approved plan. We do have some significant changes coming to you, particularly for South Central coming up in the mid-year adjustment. And here's a quick look at all the minor variances that are in the handouts. I've touched on most of these already. And then on the capital side of things, as mentioned, fairly large adjustment coming for South Central, really around accelerating that revenue date into this fiscal year and not exceeding the budget, multi-year budget in any way, just moving those funds forward. And then again, some minor changes on the system-wide streetcar in Northwest. And that concludes my presentation on Q2. I'd be happy to address any questions that the subcommittee has.
I'll open up the floor for any questions.
You have to put your microphone on.
Sorry. I was looking at the Tempe streetcar. Is that just, it's because of the timing of the receipt, like the receipt was received later than expected, or?
Thank you, Councilmember Pastor, for the question. Yes, vehicles tend to be delivered at very different times. This is really an open contract and some of those remaining milestone payments for that project.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, we'll move to item number 5. Mr. Olson will keep you right there to give us a fiscal year 2026 service level budget assumptions update.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm going to provide an update of the assumptions that we shared back with this group in October. These assumptions are really for the transit services portion of the operating budget, essentially what your cities fund through the annual intergovernmental agreements that we update each year. We work very closely with your cities on setting those service levels and that are desired in your communities. So not a whole lot of change here, but I'm going to focus more on the updates that we did make since that presentation in October. Starting with RPTA, just providing some updates here on the most recent information that we received from published city documents around local revenues. Some cities have done much better than planned, some a little bit under plan, but in general, I think it's fairly positive. Some of the year-to-year change is slowing down, as I'll show you here in a minute. So an update from the last time we met here, essentially just showing how this compares to 24 actuals, 250.1 million collected in FY24, and the comparison to the budget for 25 as well as 26. We do use the Public Transportation Fund forecast that is developed and provided by ADOT. It's our official forecast for Prop 400. No change to federal and advertising. Just a quick update here. When we presented this last time, we only had a couple months worth of PTF revenues received. So through December, we're slightly under budget for FY25, 1.5% less than planned. However, still about 1.2% higher than prior years. So still seeing some positive, but we've had record highs in PTF over the last 3 or 4 years or so. No change to fair revenues. We'll keep that flat. And then base service levels, very minor changes from October's presentation. Discussions with your member city staff and our service planning team have been ongoing since we last met. And really, we're just locking in the desired service levels within your communities here. So some of the services were reduced or increased, some deferred, just all really dependent upon staff suggestions at your cities. Overall, the decrease is about 150,000 miles, or 1% of the total miles that are delivered. And here's some of those changes. I won't go through all those. No change to our East Valley bus contract. We have rates for the 5 years. And then on the West Valley, no change. We still have this RFP on the street and hope to bring those rates to you later this fiscal year. Minor updates here on the rates, just based upon updated trip and data information from our Accessible Transit Services group and some of the changes within the pricing tiers that go along in that contract. Some updates here on current market trends. There are some bright spots in the economy. CPI in the U.S. and Phoenix area has been below 3% for several months, but still above the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Stock market has had some strong gains in the last couple of years. Gas and diesel have decreased modestly over this past year, as we'll mention in the mid-year adjustment. We are facing a number of economic headwinds that we want to keep our eyes on, particularly potential impacts related to the recent tariffs and potential changes to PTF, sales tax, collections, and some of the trends we're seeing there. For the reasons outlined, I think we'll be cautiously optimistic in this outlook and just continue to monitor some of those trends. Minor update here on initiatives risk, a very good one, the one that we're very happy with. Prop 479 has now been moved from a risk to an initiative since voters approved that extension of the half-cent sales tax on November 5th. So that's the update there. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the RPTA side before moving into Valley Metro Rail.
Thank you so much. I'm taking a look at the the risk under the West Valley contracts rates. How long do we think that we'll be we'll be looking for the RFP to come back?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just checked with our procurement team before this meeting, and we expect that to be later this fiscal year, so Q4 sometime. Most
Sounds like
likely
it.
May, June timeframe.
Thank you. Any additional questions, committee members?
No.
Okay, moving into Valley Metro Rail, and not a whole lot of changes here. Keeping our fare revenues flat. Rail transportation, this is one minor update here. As you know, we build this budget, 9 months ahead of time. We do like to include a little bit of contingency in that first round that we give to your cities in October. We had 5% in that budget. We've firmed up some of those numbers and the unknown information we've gathered, and so we've reduced that contingency to 0%. So that is what we plan on moving forward with, which is very common for the Valley Metro Rail budget. No change here. We've got the two-line system opening. Some minor updates to our state grid repair plan. Our maintenance team does a really good job at surveying different components and assessing the heat impact on some of the stuff. And so we made that update, scratched 2 of those off based upon their input, and added the battery replacements and existing fleet programs. And again, here, just the one minor update is on the Prop 479, moving that from a risk to an initiative since it's passed. So that concludes my update on Valley Metro Rail. I'd be happy to address any questions that the subcommittee has.
Any questions for our subcommittee members?
I do.
Okay.
Because I just saw one.
Yeah, go for it.
And the residential rental tax elimination, were we been prepping for that, or January 2025? Do we, I guess as the Valley Metro, do we receive that funding? No, because the cities receive the funding. Okay.
Yeah, Councilman Pastor, I can jump in there. Yeah, so we don't receive that directly. It's not part of the regional sales tax. It's only for municipalities. But certainly in consideration of that, since that bill was passed over a year ago, we've been working with member cities to keep that in consideration for sure in terms of, the city's lost revenues as a result of that. So, we've been mindful of making sure that, our budgets take that into account.
Consideration.
Yeah, and then recognizing, the cities like Phoenix, you guys have a specific transit program and a financial plan for that. And your transit staff has had to make adjustments to that as a result, and just working with them to make sure that, what we're doing is, consistent with what they're able to fund. So, and we'll continue to work closely with the cities going forward.
Okay, now I understand, because I was like, and I understand because I was like, well, that doesn't, it affects Valley Metro, but it affects the cost or the dynamics is really with the cities.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of indirect.
It's an indirect in the sense of if some of those taxes went to the transportation area, then how does that affect us?
Yeah, so we've had conversations with the transit staff over there to get a sense of the impacts to the transit program, and
Right.
be mindful of that, especially as we plan going forward for the various projects and services.
Which is good, because it does affect.
This is Jennifer. I have some questions or some statements.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Tempe has some concerns about the higher paratransit costs caused by a reduction in paratransit trips provided. It doesn't make sense for us to pay so much more for less service. It is our understanding that the provider has been unable to deliver all trips as intended. This is a contributing factor. Looking ahead, we'd like to request that the cost structure for this contract is revisited. And the second, what item are we on? It's really hard to tell on the phone.
Vice Mayor Adams, we are on the key assumptions for FY '26. I believe you're
On item
most
number
likely-
5. I believe.
Oh, you guys are on number 5 right now?
Yes,
Okay, so there, so that would be, okay, mine would be under item 6. I apologize. I can revisit it when I come back
okay.
or when we go to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Max, are you frozen?
I'm there. You hear me
Okay.
okay?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for the heads up. We'll turn it back over to Mr. Ken Kessler. He's going to provide an update regarding the FY '25 RPTA budget adjustments. Our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kessler.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm here to present the FY '25 mid-year budget adjustment for information discussion. We did present this yesterday to the management committees, and then this will be going forward to the boards for action later this month. So first, just talking about the RPTA operating activities. On the RPTA side, the budget adjustment does only affect operating. There's no adjustments proposed for the capital program. Tyler kind of alluded to some of these, but I'll get to them in a little more detail. So the overall budget adjustment for RPTA operations does include a number of items that we need to increase the budget for, but it also has some items that we are decreasing based on some updated estimates. So first of all, for the East Valley Bus Program, we have a reduction in the fuel estimate provided by the city of Tempe of about $2.8 million. On ride choice, about a $1.9 million increase, mainly due to the addition of Phoenix and Glendale into the program after we had already adopted the budget, as well as there's some increased provider rates from the ride choice provider. And paratransit, this number here is $4.7 million approximate increase. We just recently got some updated information from our Accessible Transit Services group. This number will be down about $700,000 when we go to the board for their approval of the mid-year budget adjustments. So just want to kind of give you that heads up that this number just recently shifted a little bit since we sent out the packet. So we just felt it'd be easier just to relay that here verbally to the committee than try to revise the packet and create any confusion. So, and again, this mid-year budget adjustment for paratransit is due to higher rates based on comparison or the actual trip volume compared to where we had anticipated volume to be a couple of years ago when we issued the solicitation for this contract. It's got 5 different tiers based on the volume of trips and service hours. And as you have lower volume, you go into lower volume tiers, the rates are higher. So that's what drove this part of the increase here. Our staff has worked with the member staff recently to kind of discuss and go through the details on this particular contract issue. I do want to mention we put a contract amendment in place to address some of the issues in terms of last contract year, which ended September 30th. We had to do a contract year true up because we billed, or the vendor billed at a rate that we were expecting to be at a volume, but we just missed that mark by a little bit. So we had to true up for the year to a higher rate. Going forward, the amendment basically removes the ability to do a contract year and a true up and puts in place a 12-month rolling period where we look back 12 months. We'll take the average and see what tier that puts us in so that each month stands on its own so that we don't get to a contract year end and have a true up. And that was especially challenging because the contract year ends September 30th and the prior fiscal year is already closed out in terms of our financial our books, as well as all the reconciliations with the members. Moving on, as far as the additional items in the operating budget, we do have some increases for the regional van pull program, as Tyler mentioned. It's actually a good story here. This is based on increased participation. So growth in the program has exceeded what we had anticipated. Coming out of the pandemic, the participation level was low as a result of the pandemic. But in the last year or so, we've really grown quite well to much higher levels. And this program is fully funded by participants' fares and federal funds. And then just a smaller item for the I-10 Broadway Curve project. We do some marketing and outreach as part of that to keep folks informed and push people to use transit during the project. And as a result of the delays in completing this project, we need a little more budget in the current fiscal year to get to the end of that particular project. And then lastly, we have a reduction from City of Phoenix in the fixed route service that they operate, but is funded through the Public Transportation Fund. So that's why it flows through our budget. They do have some updates to their cost per mile based on additional federal funding for preventive maintenance, which brings their net cost per mile down, as well as similar to the Tempe service, lower fuel estimates. Source of funds. Here's a recap of the FY25 budget, and then the changes in the source of funds. And then here's just a summary table of those changes I just went through in a little more detail for the operating program. So that concludes my presentation, and this recommendation is not for this committee. This is just for information only today. So happy to take any questions at this time.
Madam Chair, I have questions or comments.
Go ahead, proceed, please.
Yes, once again, our paratransit has gone down trips, yet we're paying more money. And so I'm looking ahead. Can we request that the cost structure for this contract is revisited?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Adams, thank you for your commentary. I can tell you that we have issued a change order on the current paratransit contract with MTM that rectifies the prior pricing. We do anticipate no true up at the end of the current contract year, which began on October 1 of 2024. We will also incorporate the experience from this most recent contract into the scoping and pricing structure of any future paratransit contract. Mr. Kessler, anything on the financials?
No, I think one thing I do want to mention is that this contract was really right on the cusp of these two different billing tiers. We were very, very close to, or the vendor was very close to being in the higher volume tier, which was the lower rate, which we were paying throughout the year because that was the expectation. So we came in just under that at the end of the contract year. There has been some growth in paratransit ridership, so that may help us keep us into that lower rate tier. But then the other thing I want to mention with the West Valley multimodal contract RFP out there, once that contract is in place, some of the paratransit trips will shift away from the current vendor to that West Valley vendor. And that estimate is about 20% of paratransit trips. And what that will do, at least give us cost certainty, meaning it's going to put us very solidly into the one tier. And that really we're at a place where we would have to have almost a complete decimation of demand for paratransit in order to move us down to a lower volume and higher rate tier beyond that. So we'll be solidly into that tier really for the remainder of the contract.
Well, this is Jennifer again, Madam Chair, if I may. The change order does not address the change order does not address the higher costs. I don't think that. I mean, that's our problem, that we have less service and higher costs, and that we have a heartburn about that. So how are we going to address that situation?
Mr. Kessler, I think, and Madam CEO, I know that you're there. I'm more concerned about the tier structure going forward. So I don't know if we could change that, because you're right. If the ridership goes down, we don't want the cost to go up. There might be other contributing factors, you said, with our multimodal in the West Valley. But I guess I'm looking at the tier structure and hoping that could be modified when we renegotiate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember Adams. So the tier structure moving forward will change, and in fact, the process has changed moving forward. I can't change the tier structure that was outlined in the contract retrospectively, of course, because we do have a contract with that vendor that we must honor. And unfortunately, as Mr. Kessler indicated, we ended up right on the cusp of the boundary between these two different pricing tiers. So the first year of performance, which was October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024, that's the subject of this discussion. For current contract year, I believe we have remediated the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that. I mean, we are, if volume remains where it was last year, although we are up a bit, I think nearly 10%. But if we do fall into that lower volume as we did last contract year, we will be, we'll be at that higher rate. However, we'll be looking at that every month, each month. So very possibly over the rest of this contract term until the new West Valley contract is in place, we could be in the lower tier some months and we could be in the higher tier some months. And the budget adjustment before us here is really worst case scenario if we were in that higher rate tier for the whole remaining term of the year.
I appreciate the clarification. Any additional questions?
I have some questions. So did I hear correctly, we're gonna be in the higher rate tier with less paratransit demand? Or we're in the higher tier and we're having more demand?
So right now, for this fiscal year or this contract year, demand is up. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%. So if we maintain that and the vendor provides because there's overflow providers as well, and that's part of this. So if they perform the trips at a high percentage in terms of what they did last year, with the demand, we're probably going to be, for most months, we're going to be in the higher volume, lower rate tier. And it's really just kind of on a month by month basis, depending on where demand is at.
So if I may, Madam Chair, I want to clarify that the tier structure is such that as we have higher demand, we have a lower rate per trip. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. And
Thank you.
so the reason, I'm sorry, the reason why we have a high rate right now, I'm gonna say tier one, I don't know, is because we have lower demand. I'm trying to understand the issue.
I'm going to try to answer that. I'm going to invite Mr. Kessler, Mr. Powell to please correct me. So in the past contract year, which ended September 30, 2024, we did have higher demand than the original pricing structure originally anticipated. And when I reference original pricing structure, please do recall that that pricing structure was developed a year in advance of the contract beginning as we move through the procurement process, right? So that would have been in 2022 sometime. And our demand exceeded that structure. We fell kind of at the cusp, as Mr. Kessler mentioned, of the level between the two tiers, but the contract provider wasn't equipped to provide that higher level of service. Thereby, some of those trips went to an overflow provider or providers, and the contractor performed, so the trips were still performed. The good news, I suppose, is that we're not denying the trips and our 88 customers are still receiving that service, but some of it had to be performed with an overflow contractor. Some of it was performed with a primary contractor who is MTM. As a result, we're paying the overflow contractor, and MTM fell into a lower pricing tier. We have since executed a change order such that there's a true up at the end of every month. We are working with MTM, and they have increased their workforce and fleet availability to reply to the demand that we have at the time. And then that's present. And then midterm, we are looking forward to the West Valley contract, which is going to shift some of the aberration of that service off the East Valley contract and take some of the pressure off this particular contractor and market to cover the whole region. Have I answered that
Just
accurately?
one clarification. I think you got one piece a little backwards. So the actual demand for the first contract year was below what was anticipated when the solicitation was drafted a couple of years ago. So, and that's basically, the demand was higher at that point in time. And as I think folks have heard, over some time now, a lot of demand has shifted from paratransit to ride choice, which, on just looking at that, has been a good thing because ride choice has been a less expensive service. However, that shifting in demand over there to ride choice away from paratransit brought our actual demand for paratransit down from what we had expected when the contract solicitation was first drafted.
Okay, so am I hearing, I'm sorry, Max, Madam Chair, can I speak?
Yes, please proceed.
So what
Thank you. And I'm off
Okay.
video just so that it won't break up and you can hear me.
Okay. So I'm trying to get to where Councilwoman Adams is requesting. So I'm trying to understand the shifts, the moving and the shifting that is happening to then be able to either answer her question or get a solution to her question. And so what I'm hearing is that there's all these complicated ways of making this happen. And we're going to shift here and we're going to shift here and ride share and everything else. But at the end of the day, there was a request, and the request was to go back and look at the contract. But what I'm hearing through the explanation is that it will level out at a certain point.
Yeah, well, I mean, we should level out within a tier. Unfortunately, it's the higher price tier, but the contract is what it is unless the contractor would agree to changing those tiers and those prices, which I highly doubt they would, because, you know, they're beholden to their shareholders or, you know, the owners or whatever. So I think to fix the tiers is when we re-procure the contract to adjust the pricing schedule would be the fix for that going forward.
Okay, so then we can't solve her issue.
We have, when Mr. Kessler references, we have leveled it out. We have done what we can do within the current contract, which is issue a change order to prevent this retrospective true up of the contract, which is triggering this mid-year budget adjustment. So we do not anticipate that we'll sit in this room 1 year from now and have a mid-year budget adjustment for the same item.
Madam Chair, if I could speak.
Yes, thank you.
The contractor basically has no incentive to operate more trips because the higher tier is a price reduction for them. So I just, you know, I guess what I'm saying is we need to do better on how we evaluate these things with the contracts.
Agreed and understood, council
Thank
member.
you. And thank you, Councilmember Pastor, for trying to clarify this situation. It just doesn't seem that difficult to me, you know, like if you do less, then you get paid more money. That doesn't make sense to me. It's incongruent. So that's why I'm concerned, and obviously we're getting less service and paying more money. So that's what I'm concerned about, and I want that to change in the future contracts.
Yes, we will certainly look to draft a better pricing schedule going forward when we move into future procurements for this contract, for sure, for sure.
And when will that be? Because I thought we just went through an RFP, and I don't know why I think this, but sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, council member.
You're fine.
This is a 3-year base contract, and we are in the 2nd year of the contract. We are 5 months into the 2nd year of the contract.
Is there anything we can do, like, to reach out to another vendor, or we're just stuck for the next 3 years, is what you're saying?
Well,
I think we're only in this contract for another year and 7 months. Am I correct, Mr. Kessler?
yes, that's correct. Given the structure of the contract and the issues that have arisen, We will go back and evaluate, whether it makes sense to exercise options that are on this contract. And, we'll look at re-procuring it, given the timeline where we're at. A procurement for a contract like this takes about a year from start to finish. So we will certainly look to get drafting the appropriate materials for that and working on that expeditiously, so that, we do what's in the best interest, because I agree that the contract seems to be constructed with incentive for the main provider to deliver fewer trips to stay in a higher rate tier and make a higher profit. And I think that was an unintended consequence from how this solicitation and request for proposals was drafted a couple of years ago. So we will definitely take lessons learned from that and draft a better solicitation going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kessler, for being able to field all these questions. I appreciate you as well, Ms. Medford Miller, for being attentive to our concerns. Without additional questions, I believe we should be moving to item number 7, Valley Metro Rail Fiscal Year 2025 Mid-Year Budget Adjustments. Mr. Kessler, I think you're going to drive this one and provide information regarding the budget adjustments for VMR.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So going over the mid-year budget adjustment for Valley Metro Rail, sort of conversely to RPTA, most of the budget adjustment here is in the capital budget, but I'll first start with the operating. The changes there really, if you recall back around the same time we adopted the budget for the current fiscal year, the board approved providing wage rate adjustments to our fair inspection and security services contractor to allow them to attract and retain more staff, because they were struggling at the wages that they had at the time to really attract and retain staff, and vacancy levels were very high. This strategy has worked. We're last reported about 3% vacancy, and I know this contract was in the 50% vacancy range at one point. So, and this was really about, since we didn't have that additional cost of those higher wages built into the budget at the time it was approved, we're coming to you for a mid-year adjustment here to add about $900,000 to the budget to cover those additional costs for security. And then just a quick look, here's just a summary of the sources of funds for the operating budget and the $900,000 increase going forward from this budget adjustment. Now, and just a recap of our various Valley Metro Rail operating programs there, with the increase showing up in the light rail security line item. And then now getting into the changes for our capital activities for the budget adjustment on the capital side. The Rio East Dobson preliminary engineering and work is underway. And so I think we've gotten, since this budget was adopted initially, we're in a position to move forward with a little more work on this fiscal year. So we needed a little increase. It doesn't impact the overall project budget. It's just the timing of when we're able to do the work, moving it into this fiscal year. Similarly, but to a larger extent, South Central, again, the overall project budget, and Tyler mentioned this in his presentation, for the South Central project does not change. So the overall FTA grant project budget stays the same. This is just an issue of timing. Some costs from last year that had slipped into this year just due to timing of invoicing by vendors and contractors. And then, as Tyler also mentioned, moving revenue service ahead from FY26 into FY25, we expect to have more of those capital costs incurred this fiscal year. So we're amending the budget to add those costs into the current year to have enough appropriation to cover that. Then Northwest Phase 2, just some of these project costs that to close out the project, some final activities to work towards finalizing and closing out the grant for that particular project. Tempe Streetcar, some additional funds into the current fiscal year. Again, doesn't affect the overall project budget, but really just the timing, mainly due to the payments, the milestone payments for revenue vehicles, as well as the payments for spare parts for those vehicles. Capital extension, again, just more work at this point being expected to happen during this fiscal year than what was planned at the time the FY25 budget was prepared and adopted. And then on the Gilbert Road extension, this is timing of the planned milestone payments for revenue vehicles, moving those costs into the current fiscal year. Again, that total project budget for the grant not being affected. And some system-wide improvements and stated good repair items necessitating some additional funds in the current fiscal year. Again, due to timing of a variety of projects, able to move some of that work into this year, as well as some work that was planned for last year. Recall, we underran the budget and system-wide improvements and stated good repair. Some of that work slipped into this fiscal year that we need to get the additional budget appropriation into the current year. And then the summary here of the sources of funds, primarily member city contributions, PTF funds, and then some federal funds. And then this is just a summary of those uses by project. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? I know this will be an action item for our full board, correct, Mr. Kessler?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Be great if we can bounce around any questions outside of the fact we might have a little bit of heartburn on this. I do know these changes are required for us to have sound operations. Hearing no questions, we can move to item number 8. Thank you so much, Mr. Kessler. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Item number
Thank you
8.
for the feedback.
Oh, yeah. Item number 8 is internal audit update. Ms. Sabrina Beckstrom, Chief Auditor Officer, will provide an update on actions taken in internal audit, external reviews, prior audit findings, and recommendations. This is for information only. Ms. Beckstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This last month, our auditors continued to work on 3 audits: the Operator Fitness for Duty audit, Valley Metro Employee Mileage Reimbursement Program audit, and the IT Change Management audit. Those are in full field work, so we're moving steady on those. And we also have 12 recommendations from prior audits that we are tracking. 6 of those recommendations will be fulfilled with the implementation of a new procurement manual, which is nearing the end of the drafting and review process. So those recommendations should be filled in the coming months. Those are all the updates that I have for today. Are there any questions?
Yeah, you just said 9 of the 12 will be remedied with the procurement manual update?
6.
6. Thank you for the clarification. I misheard. Thank you. Any
You're welcome.
additional questions?
I have, Madam Chair, this is Jennifer. May I?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so it's my understanding there's 9 recommendations surpassing their estimated easy for me to say today, implementation date. It seems that there haven't been any recent updates provided for any of these. Is there anything we can do to ensure AFS recommendations are implemented in a more timely way?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Adams and Chair. The majority of the ones that are open and in progress that have a due date that are in the past are recommendations that took a longer period of time to implement due to changes in staff and the big one was the major overhaul of the procurement manual. And so in lieu of implementing smaller changes for the recommendation to be implemented quicker, the major overhaul of the manual took longer, but it was a better implementation. So that's why those took longer. The others, we do have some difficulty sometimes with a coordination with the recommendations being implemented. So we need to work on getting those responses back in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, if we can do that, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Anybody else have any concerns, questions? Thank you so much, Ms. Ekstrom, for this internal audit update. Without any additional questions, we will move to item number 9, intergovernmental agreements, contract change orders, amendments, and awards. The intergovernmental agreement, contract change orders, amendments, and awards will appear on the board agendas. This is provided now for information only. If any of our committee members have questions, please reach out to Valley Metro staff. For those who are on site, I believe they're in the room with you. Otherwise, we can come back together as a board and have a full discussion on these items when we meet in 2 weeks. We can move now to item number 10, report on current events and suggested future agenda items. This is the time for any of the members on the meeting to report on current event and request suggested future agenda items for consideration. I'd like to open up the floor for anybody to make those requests now or share information. Hearing and seeing none in the room, I will go ahead and share our next meeting is scheduled for the Audit and Finance Subcommittee on Thursday, March 6th at noon. Otherwise, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation and engagement.
Thanks, everybody, for your clarifications. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for being in the space, Councilmember Pastor and Councilmember McMahon. Have a wonderful week, ladies. Take care.